I gotta tell you, I've been having an experience over the past couple of months as I've been getting ready for this talk. And this morning, I feel like Dorothy when she wakes up and she looks around her and she has just had this experience, this incredible experience. And she realizes that everyone who is in her life, everyone who is right there, was a part of that incredible experience. And as I look around at all of your faces, like, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. And so all of these thoughts I've been having about this, and I will tell you that for every word I will speak this morning, there were 1,000 I had. There were 1,000 thoughts I had. And so for 2 months. And here's the thing: you think Reverend Lane, that it's hard for her to come up with something every week. It's actually a lot easier because you kind of got to go with your first thought. So a couple months ago, I was sitting in Sacred Cup, and a Sacred Cup this morning. I swear y'all are in my head. You were in my head. You were in my head. You were in my head, and I heard my entire talk being articulated by the people in this room. I'm like, how do you know what I'm going to say? So, a couple of months ago, we were having a conversation, and one of the people in the room said, I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. And I thought to myself, where exactly is there? Where is this there we talk about? And as Heather brought up, my other thought was about a friend who, whenever they would go on a road trip and her kids in the back seat would start saying, are we there yet? She would always tell them, 1 more hour. No matter how many times they asked, it was always 1 more hour. So this little cartoon, this little comic came up. And we kept Nirvana.
That's great.
And I thought, that's my talk right there. That's my talk right there. Is that feeling, that existential feeling of where I am right now cannot possibly be there. It can't possibly be where I'm going. This place right here can't possibly be my destination. There's got to be more. So what happens when, in this case, and the reason that all these things are coming together, the reason they're all like coagulating today, is that when you have a thought, and you will know when you're having that thought, something will just spark you, and suddenly you'll start to see it everywhere. You'll start to hear that idea showing up in everything in your life. And I swear, I'm about to lose my damn mind because it's been happening to me for 2 months. And I am so full. I am saturated. And it is like the most amazing feeling because it is making me want to know more. It's making me want to stretch. And so I have some props today because I'm a very visual person, and
Awesome.
so I have my little bus, my travel bus, and it actually does move if you pull it. And I have a slinky. And my 3-year-old neighbor, I have this little baby friend, and she comes over to my house and she tears it apart. She finds everything in there. And so she picked up this slinky one day and I thought, oh my God, that's exactly what I need. I need a spiral. I need something that shows how we spiral up through life. And of course she got a hold of the other one, and which no longer spirals because it is bent all the heck. But I think, and I thought to myself, maybe this one's actually the one that's more accurate. Maybe this is the one that we actually travel, is the one that cannot go back to its original form. It literally can't. I don't think you could even have an engineer put this back together. But that really is what our life looks like. So So I thought about this, and I thought about, why do we get so uncomfortable in these places in our lives where we're just, we know there's more, but we can't go there. And so in the Zen Buddhist saying, there's a saying about how do I get to enlightenment? And the monk says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's the commitment to the journey itself. It isn't the there. You're not going somewhere. Enlightenment is not a destination. It's a being. It's a beingness. And so every one of us has a different story, a different journey, a different vehicle that we have traveled in throughout our lives. We have different bodies, we have different experiences. And we're trying like heck to find a sense of oneness in all of those. And that hasn't been easy in the past few years. It really hasn't. I think that we've been digging ourselves out of a place that showed up when a worldwide pandemic served to separate us all. This thing that we could neither see nor hear, and that we only knew was around if we couldn't taste or smell. We were existentially afraid of each other. We have become threats to one another. And our very presence in each other's lives, our very physical presence, was dangerous. Now, I think there are people in this room who know what that feels like, whose very presence is taken as dangerous to others. This experience allowed all of us to know what that is, to know what it means that we are not welcome. So it was during this time that I really started to dig into my spiritual journey. What else was I going to do? I had a lot of books. I had a lot of time, and so I read, and I took classes, and I sought out teachers. But still, there was that sense that I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I can't tell where I'm going. So I was thinking about my mom. My mom died at the end of 2020. She did not die of COVID. But Randy wrote something the other day in the newsletter, and he was talking about the loneliness of that separation, of that time of separation, when we couldn't be around each other. And I think really that my mom probably died of loneliness. And for the rest of us who had not actively chosen to visit her when it was okay to do so, we get to live with that feeling that I missed my chance. So after she died, she had squirreled away enough money that she could give something to each of her 8 children. And so in that place of coming into our awareness that life is not forever, that we might not get to see each other again, that just that awareness, I decided to use my money to buy a truck. To buy a truck that I could camp in the back of, that I could tow something if I wanted to, that could climb up and down hills, that could go places. And so we did. We packed that thing up and we left. we took off. I was thinking about when I heard Tracy Chapman and Luke Combs, when the lyrics of the song to Fast Car, ain't got no plans, ain't going nowhere. We got in the truck and we just pointed ourselves north and said, well, let's go see some people. So our first destination was Ohio, where I have relatives. And we masked, we did all the things, and we went to visit those people. And after we were done, we pointed the truck west. We know it was west because I have a fancy little navigation thing on my new truck. And we drove. And we drove. And we drove. And we drove across the prairies. We drove past the windmills. There are a lot of windmills in this country. We drove through soybean fields. We drove everywhere into the vastness that is this country. It is huge. And every time we would just see something that looked interesting, we'd pull over and we'd go visit it. They weren't special things. They were nothing that anybody writes about or takes pictures of. They were just places. They were places that other people live. There were places that I've never seen before, and there were places that people talk about only in sound bites. And I got to see them, and I got to look at the people and talk to the people and eat their food and smell their air. I got to be in someone else's experience. I'm not actually telling you anything I wrote here. It's 12 pages of words. And I would be glad to share it with them with you later. However, I am trusting Spirit to guide me on this journey right now. So when we got out to South Dakota, we decided we would go see Mount Rushmore. We had never been there. And the night before, this was at the end of April, the night before it had snowed up on top of the mountain. And we got up there, and the next morning, I looked at the faces, and there were tears streaming down their faces. It's like, how are they crying? It was the snow melting. But I thought, oh my gosh, what a perfect image for where we are right now. That those who had higher visions for this country, who had higher visions for us, were now weeping. And I wept too in that moment. And I thought, on their behalf, I thought to myself, are we there yet? And I felt a little bad for them, that they had tried so hard to create a vision for us. And I felt like we were not doing a very good job of seeking a more perfect union. So we drove down the road a little bit more, and there's a statue that has been in progress for 80 years, the statue of Crazy Horse, the Lakota chief. And it has many, 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 many years to go before it is finished. It is being privately funded, and so there is not the funding that came with building Mount Rushmore, which was built on Lakota land, on tribal land. And it almost looked to me like that face was receding into the mountain. Like it was giving up on ever experiencing freedom. So these are the kinds of things that I thought about along the way. And I love words, and I love to string them together, and sometimes they're really amazing. But usually I get hung up on semantics. I get hung up on, what does the word actually mean? So I was thinking about the words farther and further, which I've always sort of used interchangeably because I don't know. And so I was training myself to say, okay, we have driven farther in order to understand further what this country is about. So back and forth, back and forth. We kept going. We ended up all the way out in Washington State. And we visited some friends that we had only previously known virtually, which is how any of us knew anybody during that time. The only way we could know each other. And they invited us into their home. They let us stay overnight. They fed us dinner, leftover spaghetti. And we connected. We connected in real life. And all the conversations we had online, we connected. We were there. We kept going. We drove down through Oregon, visited a cousin who has been asking us to come out there forever, and then when everything shut down, nobody could go out there. So we said, we're going to go all the way to Oregon. Now, we drove all the way down to Southern California also, and you will be amazed to think, maybe, that we never actually saw the Pacific Ocean. We did not go all the way out there. We figured we'd do that another day. But then we came back across. We came back across the desert, all of the deserts, every desert. We had the opportunity to visit a friend of my older sister's who was an exchange student from a Navajo reservation when they were in high school back in the 60s. And we had the opportunity to be led by her, by a native Navajo, into Canyon de Chelly, down into the deep, deep, deep canyons. And she pointed out where her grandmother had lived in a little house way down there. And we walked along and we saw the handprints, the petroglyphs from 3,000 years old, from a tribe that does not exist anymore, but left its mark, showed that it had been there. We kept going. We had no choice. It's funny how you get all the way out there and you're like, oh man, you have to drive all the way back. But as we drove along, we stopped in Las Vegas. I won $100 in a 1 hour stop there. And I was like, okay, we're getting out now. And bought a tank of gas, which is about what it cost out there to fill our truck at the time. But then we kept going and we stopped in Oklahoma City. And we saw the site of the bombing. And the monument there is a series of chairs, 168 of them, empty chairs. And we felt that. We heard the sounds on the recording of what happened that day when their freedom was taken away from them. We kept going. We finally ended up in Alabama, and we went to the National Museum of Peace and Justice, which is also known as the Lynching Museum. And we looked up and saw the 4,000 representations of people who had been lynched, African American people who had been lynched in the South. And we felt that. And we stood next to people whose ancestors were hanging there from the ceiling. And I thought again to myself, are we there yet? I realized, no, we're still not there. We're still not there yet. There were 1,000 other things I could tell you about that trip, about things we saw, things we experienced, things we felt. This country is so very rich. It is rich in so many ways, and it is poor in so many other ways. It is poor of spirit. I think right now that is where we stand, is in that place of where is our wealth? Where is our wealth of spirit? Where is that feeling that those early pioneers had when they were seeking freedom, when they were seeking what FDR enumerated, ironically, on January 6th, 1941, the 4 freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. And on January 6, 2021, I thought to myself, are we there yet? No, we're not there yet. So my slinky, I realized that we were this. This is where we were. We were sitting there, just a giant, just bundle of potential energy that we were all storing up while we were sitting in our houses, while we were separated from each other. And then I looked at the trip we were taking, and I realized, we talked about it in Sacred Cup this morning, the spiraling up of our evolution. That life moves in a spiral, and I will tell you what Ernest Holmes said about that. Because he spoke about the same time that FDR was enumerating the 4 freedoms. He spoke these words. He said, "All people are not only a center of God consciousness, they are immortal beings, forever expanding, forever spiraling upward, forever growing in spiritual stature. Not some people, but all people are immortal, for everyone will finally overcome or transcend any misuse of the law which they have made in their ignorance. Complete redemption must come alike to all. What transformations must ensue, what changes of consciousness must take place before this is finally brought about, the finite has not yet grasped. But through the whisperings of divine intuition, we know that even though we now see as through a glass darkly, we shall someday behold reality face to face. We shall be satisfied when we consciously awake in the likeness of that divinity which shapes our ends. Forever spiraling upward." And I realized that as we took off on our journey, as we went out, we were stretching just a little bit, And we stretched some more, and we stretched some more, and we stretched some more, and we kept going. I realized this could go on forever. There's probably no point at which this will become just a flat, straight line. It will just keep going. Finally, there was in a little corner of southeastern Alabama, and I've had my thoughts about Alabama. Mostly learned from sources that do not include the actual lived experiences of people there. So here I was, we were in the corner of Alabama, and driving down a side road, and we saw one of those little brown signs, which usually says, "There's something cool over here." And we saw this little sign, like, "Ooh, let's go there." And we pulled in, and there was just one car there, a little old beat-up Toyota station wagon. And so we got out, and we were walking to the attraction, which was the Natural Arch Park, which is a cave. It's a giant cave. And it's got, the roof is falling in by bits, so it has left an arch over the top. And I thought, we're in Alabama? I didn't know Alabama had anything. Like, oh, I learned so much on this trip. So we're walking toward the cave. And out walking toward us, it was almost like it was an image more than a person. It was this woman with long, curly red hair. She was wearing just sort of a white dress. It was just sort of a flowing white dress. And she had with her a three-legged pit bull. And we stopped and we talked to her for a minute, and I introduced myself, and she told me that her name was Grace. And I thought to myself, of course it is. Of course it is. I realized that was exactly what this trip was about. This trip was about the grace to be able to leave home, the abundance, to be able to choose to go somewhere, the freedom, the boundlessness, the limitlessness that we talk about in this teaching. The idea that there is no there. Everywhere is there. Everywhere we go is there. Here is there. And now I'm going to have to figure that one out because that's like further and farther. And that doesn't work. But the incredible grace that kept us safe when we got sideswiped in Memphis and didn't receive any damage beyond what I could fix with. I actually took an old football and a basketball and I shoved it up in the tire about the thing, and I took a bicycle pump up and I blew them up and made the dent come out. So I learned to be a mechanic. But what I realized is like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was living my life like this. I had no realization that my life was just this little block of potential energy until I released it, until I gave myself the grace to stretch and to go and to become and to see and to understand and to find out all this stuff. So when we got home, when we pulled back into the neighborhood in Odessa, we were not the same people who had left. We could not go back to the shape we had been. We were permanently changed. And Reverend Lane read a quote last week from Annette White that said, "Each time you try something for the first time, you will grow. A little piece of the fear of the unknown is removed and replaced with a sense of empowerment." We drove back into the neighborhood, and all of the seeds that had been planted during the pandemic were now infants and toddlers wandering around on my street. Then I looked around and thought, look at all that potential energy. Look at all that possibility of a next generation rising higher, getting further, taking us to a higher place, up, up, up. So when Derek sang that song, The Path of Love, I thought, that's exactly what that trip was for me. And not only did I take the time to love others along the way, I allowed myself to be loved. I allowed myself to be taken in to people's homes. People who had been told, don't talk to anybody, don't go to the grocery store, don't do anything. We showed up and said, can we stay overnight? Grace. So, as Dorothy came back from her long, strange trip, and woke up that morning to see that nothing had changed, and yet absolutely everything had changed. There's no retracing those steps. There's no going back. Grace, the one in the cave, she was going on almost exactly the same trip we were. She and her dog, they just got in the car, left Florida. They were driving around the country. Every single one of us is going to get blown out of our comfort zones by something. That's one thing we can all absolutely be guaranteed. Storms, tornadoes, hurricanes. We're going to spiral up one way or another. So whether we choose it, which is always an option, or it happens to us, it's going to happen. So choose well. Choose well. And by the way, this, when I was 4 years old, my father married my stepmother, and 9 of us and a dog piled into this thing and drove from California to Michigan. 5 of them were teenagers who had never met each other before, but were now brothers and sisters. Talk about a long, strange trip. But so this was on my dashboard as we drove around the country, and I took it out and I would put it places and make it crash off of various things. But that's my symbol. That's my symbol when I forget to stretch. Get in and go. Just get in and go. So let's take a minute to anchor that. We are living in a limitless place. This universe of ours, this country of ours, this world, it is the potential energy of the divine experiencing itself as us. It is knowing itself through our excursions. It is knowing us as our journeys. It is walking with us in grace, reminding us that it's okay that we're not there yet. There is not a place. There is a journey. And I know that as I walk my journey, as I am accompanied by the people in this room, by the people online, by the people everywhere, who also are learning to spiral up in their own lives, I trust that there is something guiding us forward. There is something guiding us higher. There is grace. And I am so very grateful for that grace. I am so very grateful for the knowing that there is no there. There's nothing I need to aspire to. I simply get to walk the path of love. And so join me in doing that. Join me in knowing that it is good and very good and happening right here and right now by saying, and so it is.